You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, 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 other than day one.
Donald Trump has successfully moved the Overton window in a way that is as dangerous for the future of democracy in this country as anything else.
This is what Vout and Project 2025 wanted.
He's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great.
They control the Congress, they control the White House, and they control the courts. And so, of course, they're massively overreaching. And yes, they are getting away with it right now.
This is clearly a man who cannot tolerate criticism of him or what he does, which is exactly what authoritarianism is all about.
The New York Times is just as fake as CNN and MSDNC. They really are the enemy of the people.
What he is saying, rather bluntly, if you stand up to Donald Trump, he will punish you.
Protesters in Philadelphia, state capitals in California, Minnesota, Michigan, Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, and others showed up to oppose Trump, Musk, and Project 2025.
US and President Trump has overseen America's largest military parade in decades as nationwide protests take place against his leadership.
Demonstrations are happening right across the United States today to oppose the Trump administration.
Two visions of America. On a day the country's deepening divide was there for all the world to see.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. You're watching Logically Left right here. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf, and I've got a pretty good show today. Okay, a lot of heavy policy stuff. All right, so we're deep diving. All right, not dumpster diving. No, that's what Trump does. No, we're deep diving. Okay, we got Republicans, how they're using your healthcare as leverage in order to both strip you of your healthcare if you use the enhanced ACA subsidies, and also trying to prolong the government shutdown. Yeah, we have the Senate giving Trump even more authority to do war, specifically against Venezuela. That's really scary for anybody who actually cares about, democracy. And also, by the way, you should care if you voted for Trump, if you voted against doing endless wars. So kind of important. We have a federal judge that has ruled against Trump on his SNAP benefit cuts, ordering him to restore food aid to 42 million Americans that need it. And of course, Trump is immediately fighting back against that, saying, I don't really feel like, helping out starving Americans. That's like America first. Well, what is that? No, let them eat ballroom. I mean, insanity. And then I'm going to talk about how we have just hit a massive amount of jobs that were cut. 1.1 million Americans laid off. Wow. But you understand, Trump, I'm the jobs president. Jobs president. Yeah, the cutting jobs president. Okay. Of course. Yes. Well, you don't understand. Trump, he has no choice. He has no choice but to cut food aid for millions of people, for old, elderly folks and people who are disabled and children. You don't understand. He has to. He has to. Right. And he was the peace president too. Exactly. So look, we got a great show. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. With that said, let's get going. And we'll start out with healthcare. Oh boy. The healthcare discussion, as well as the government shutdown, okay? Because those two things are very, very much related. Okay. Is there good news about the government shutdown or a deal between Democrats and Republicans that might reopen the government and deal with the tax subsidies? No, not necessarily. Axios is reporting, however, that Republicans are optimistic. They're feeling very optimistic, which should worry everyone. Okay, and what do I mean? About reaching a deal on these ACA premium tax subsidies. And when they say deal, of course, pretty sure we all know what they really mean. Cutting or eliminating those subsidies. Okay, restricting them in some way. Look, Republicans, they're united. They're celebrating the idea of allowing 3.8 million Americans to lose their affordable health insurance. Okay, this is the party that claims to be for working people, now throwing a party over taking away your health care. Okay, so let me break down what's actually going on here. Okay, before I get too much further. Basically, the media is doing their usual thing of kind of making this sound more complicated than it really is, and they do that, in a way, I guess, to help Donald Trump, to help Republicans, and to be like, oh well, they have to cut benefits. Everybody, we have to cut the subsidies. Making the health insurance even more unaffordable for Americans. But no, here it is during COVID. Okay, during the pandemic, which we're kind of still in a pandemic. Nobody likes to, actually talk about how we are still technically in a pandemic, kind of. But anyway, Republicans, look, during COVID, as I said before, Congress, including Republicans, by the way, passed enhanced premium tax credits for the ACA, also known as Obamacare. The subsidies help working families be able to better afford health insurance, lowering their monthly premiums, right? Again, we're talking about people who are, middle class, working class, people making $30,000 to $60,000 a year. Okay, these are people who do not get health insurance through their jobs because their jobs generally do not offer them. Okay, and not only that, but there are people who work for themselves, independent contractors like myself. Okay, that make too much for Medicaid, but still can't really afford health insurance, the premiums on their own. Again, I'm a great example of that. Okay, I currently do not have health insurance as a result, because it is just too expensive, but I can't get Medicaid. So now, that said, all right, 3.8 million Americans currently rely on these enhanced subsidies, okay? Average, and they save on an average about $700 per year per person, okay, as a result. Now, for families, that comes out to about $2,000 plus per year in savings. However, these subsidies are set to expire at the end of the year. Democrats, they wanted to extend these subsidies, which makes sense, right? To keep health care affordable for working families. Now, I think what would make even more sense is going to a single-payer system, but we don't have the votes for that, or the numbers in the Senate or the House. You have the establishment Democrats that get a lot of money from health insurance companies to stop single-payer, things like that. But anyway, Democrats are at least doing the minimum here in saying, well, we don't want health insurance costs to go up for American families that much. I mean, they're set to double, but even triple, okay? And so, all right, now that's what the Democrats want, and they're willing to shut down the government. That's why we have a government shutdown right now, because Republicans have decided not to extend those subsidies. They saw this train coming for like the last year since they got back into power, and they're like, yeah, we don't care. But we're not going to do anything about that. But what are you talking about? And so, Democrats were like, well, we're not going to fund the government. We're not going to pass a CR unless you extend those subsidies. Republicans now, after all of this, according to Axios, are optimistic now about a new deal on these subsidies. Now, what does that mean? They're optimistic that they can either let the subsidies expire completely or negotiate major cuts, or add so many restrictions that millions end up losing their coverage anyway. And they're thrilled about this. They're happy about that. Okay, so let me show you the article here, the headline, Republicans quietly optimistic about fix for ACA tax credits. Okay, the word optimistic is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. What they really are optimistic about, I think, is making your premiums go up. That's the reality of the situation. They're optimistic about making healthcare unaffordable. They're optimistic about making a deal that screws you. Simple as that. Working people are probably going to get absolutely destroyed if Republicans get this deal, the deal that they would like, which would, again, involve Democrats caving to them. Think about it, though. The average retail worker making about $34,000 a year. If you're working in retail, okay, $34,000 a year, not a lot of money. So if you're working in retail, generally you do not get health insurance, okay? Generally, those jobs do not offer it. So you got to rely on the exchanges, right? Now, right now with the enhanced subsidies, that worker might be paying around $150 a month for coverage. If those subsidies expire, those premiums jump up to about $600 a month. That's $450 more. Okay, just keep a track of the math here. Okay, now that's $5,400 a year, and you're trying to do that on a $34,000 a year salary. That's not good. Unaffordable as hell. The result, of course, is you can't afford it, so you go uninsured. And when there's a health emergency, it's either bankruptcy or death. Those are your options. And that is, after all, the Republican plan. If you get sick, die quickly. And here's, of course, the most frustrating part about all this, right? There are the Republicans. These are the Republicans that claim, there are the people that Republicans claim to represent. They keep saying, we're the party of working class folks. You know, we just want to protect working class tax-paying Americans. Hell of a job you're doing, guys. All right? Look, again, these are the people who play by the rules, people who work hard. They want a fair shot. Okay? And they want to be able to afford their health insurance. Okay? That's it. But when it comes time to actually try to help those people, when it comes time to, you know, keep those health insurance premiums affordable, Republicans are like, nah. Actually, you know what we're optimistic about? We're optimistic about cutting the subsidies that help keep them affordable. Oops. But you want to know what the most infuriating part about this is? And there's a lot here, but let's look at the states that benefit most from the subsidies. Okay? First, before I get into that, I do want to show you here, this is a snippet from an article from the Kaiser Family Foundation. All right? Since the enhanced premium tax credits were introduced, the number of people who receive health insurance coverage through the ACA has more than doubled. Okay? More than 55% of the national growth, and this is what's really important here, it comes from Texas, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. And in 6 states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, and West Virginia, enrollment has more than tripled within the last 5 years. Again, a lot of this was passed, I should say a lot of this was made possible with the enhanced subsidies passed during the Biden administration. Nationwide, 93% of all ACA marketplace enrollees receive these premium tax credits. Enrollees living in states won by Trump, however, are even more likely to have subsidized coverage. In Florida, West Virginia, and Alabama, 98% of those enrolled in marketplace coverage received federal financial premium assistance. Yeah. And let me give you some of the numbers here. In Florida, 3.2 million Americans are enrolled in these ACA plans. In Texas, 2.8 million people are enrolled, and they're all getting these enhanced tax credits, by the way. North Carolina, 700,000 people, right, enrolled. Georgia, 600,000 plus people enrolled. And now, here's a pattern that you probably may have noticed. These are all red states. These are Trump states. They voted for Trump. So this is states full of people who voted for Republicans because they believed in that whole, we're the party of working people bullshit.
Bullshit.
That's what it is, too. Absolutely. And now these same Republicans, by the way, are getting ready to celebrate a deal to make your health care unaffordable. These a-holes are out there high-fiving each other in the Capitol while you're at home trying to figure out how you can afford your insulin, okay? This is class warfare. And we've been dealing with class warfare for a very, very long time, okay? And, well, hey, the rich are winning. They have been for a while. But now, and it used to be that, they would hide the fact that there is a class warfare going on right now. But now it's no longer hidden. Worst kept secret ever. Now, of course, you're gonna, you know what Republicans are gonna say to try to justify all of this, right? Oh, we can't afford it, you guys. We can't afford the enhanced subsidies. That's why we have to cut them. This is just so fiscally irresponsible. Guys, we just got to make tough choices about the budget, okay? Real tough. I mean, cutting your health care, and not my health care. Don't hands off my health care, but cutting yours, totally fine with that. Come on. Let me tell you about the fiscal responsibility according to Republicans, okay? What we say they can, or what they say we can't afford. Enhanced ACA subsidies, about $335 billion over the next 10 years, okay? That's $33.5 billion a year, okay? That helps 3.8 million working Americans be able to afford their health insurance, okay? Republicans say we can't afford that. But what do they say we can afford? Tax cuts for the rich, which cost, in 2017, this is the 2017, I'm not even talking about the 2025 numbers, okay, for the big, beautiful bill, okay? Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy, the first time, $1.9 trillion over the next 10 years, $190 billion a year, which overwhelmingly benefits millionaires and billionaires. The corporate tax rates were cut from 35 to 21%. The estate tax exemption was doubled. And look, that estate tax, by the way, it only affects multimillionaire estates. So, yeah, they're favoring the rich, all right? So let me get this straight then. Just to go over this, right? The Republicans are saying that we can afford to give Jeff Bezos another frickin' yacht, and we can afford to let corporations pay less in taxes than their secretaries, and can afford endless tax breaks for people who own private jets, like Donald Trump. But we can't afford to keep to help a retail worker keep their health insurance. What? That's not fiscal responsibility. That's not making tough choices. That is a choice. It is a choice to prioritize billionaires over working people. That's the reality. And one more thing, too. We can, what else we can apparently afford? $86 billion for defense. That's in 2024, okay? Those numbers, 2025, we're going to go up even further. That is more money than the next 10 countries combined for their military spending, all right? And by the way, we just gave Trump unlimited war powers to attack Venezuela, all right? And I'm going to do another video on that today. But, healthcare for working families? Sorry, can't do it. Tight budget. What can you do? Look, the money is there. It's always been there. They just don't think that you deserve it. Period. They think that the money should go to defense contractors, billionaires. They should get corporate tax breaks. And we should spend money on that instead of keeping your healthcare affordable. But, look, maybe I'm freaking out too much, all right? Because you might be thinking, but you understand, Jeff, you're just kind of running away with this whole thing. But what if they are actually negotiating? I mean, come on. Maybe there's a chance that we can extend the subsidies, and you're just lipping out. No, I don't think so. It gets much worse. You see, Politico noted in a recent article that Republicans are actually planning to do with the subsidies. What are they planning to do? Well, they're not just planning to cut them. They're actually going to use them as hostages in their government shutdown. Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the things that they might be doing. Now, let me explain. Senate Majority Leader John Thune promised Democrats a floor vote on extending the subsidies. Great, right? Except that House Speaker Mike Johnson refuses to actually commit to allowing any vote in the House. You kind of need both chambers. And here's the kicker. Some Senate Republicans actually want to push the government funding deadline from mid-December into January of 2026. You know why? To drag out these negotiations. Keep both the government shutdown and your health care subsidies kind of hanging over everybody's head for as long as possible. Not only are Republicans holding the entire government hostage at this point, they're also holding your health care hostage at the same time. Not good. They're saying, give us what we want. For example, spending cuts, because what do they always ask for? Spending cuts, of course, more and more cuts. Or maybe more restrictive border policy, or more funding for ICE, or whatever else. Do that, or we're going to keep the government shut down and let your healthcare subsidies expire. Which, again, Democrats are asking for, let's just extend the subsidies and put back some of the money into Medicaid that was taken out in order to give tax cuts for the rich. Okay, so look, that doesn't sound like negotiation to me. It doesn't sound like compromise. It doesn't sound like bipartisanship. It sounds like extortion. That's what it does. And it gets even more cynical, right? Democrats are looking at a discharge petition, right, which is a procedural tool to force a House vote, even if Speaker Johnson will not allow it. But that would require Republican votes. And guess what? No so-called moderate Republicans will sign on to that. Yeah. So there you go. Now, what do? Well, we got less than 2 months before the subsidies expire, and Republicans complete their hostage taking. So how do we do that? How do we fight against this, right? Well, for one, call your senators. Call your House representatives, right? I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats, whatever. Send this message. Don't use my health care as a hostage in shutdown negotiations, right? Just have them pass an extension. That's it. Extend the ACA subsidies with a clean vote. No games, no bullshit, no leverage, just an extension. That's it. Everybody wins, by the way. Yes, even Trump supporters win. And by the way, if you want to call them, the Capitol switchboard is 202-224-3121. So yeah, blow up their phones, okay? Now, second, go after the moderates, the so-called moderates, okay? House Republicans in swing districts who are vulnerable in 2026. People like Don Bacon of Nebraska, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Mike Lawler of New York. Any Republican in a district with high ACA enrollment, and there's a lot, right? Make them choose, okay? Sign the discharge petition to force a vote in the House, or you get to explain to your constituents why you let their health care subsidies expire. And you can't exactly blame that on the Democrats now, can you? Like they're trying to do. Okay? So, look, at the end of the day, though, they're pretty optimistic about making your health care unaffordable and about making a deal that screws you over. Working people, again, you're going to be destroyed by this. And so watch out for that. All right? Watch out for that. And really put the pressure on your elected officials to end this shutdown and extend those subsidies. You would be surprised. You would be surprised how much our congressmen hate when their constituents call them. Okay, they don't even want to go to town halls. They don't want to deal with you. And so if you're blowing up their phone off the hook, they're going to pay attention. They're going to pay attention. Okay. I'm sorry that was a little long here, but I told you I was going to get into it. So let's move on. Let's go to Venezuela. Wait, hold on. Where are you?
In Venezuela.
I haven't used that in a while. I'm having fun with it. Okay. Well, everybody, we just crossed a line that I think should terrify every American who actually gives a damn about, democracy. Yesterday, the U.S. Senate, your elected officials, our elected officials, voted to let Trump launch military attacks on Venezuela without any sort of permission from Congress. Look, this ain't a drill. It's not hypothetical. Trump's already been conducting covert attacks on Venezuelan fishing boats, okay? That might be, again, we don't know if they're drug boats or anything like that, but he's been attacking them anyway. He's blowing them up, all right? And now the Senate is saying, you know what? Go ahead. Attack whoever you want. We're not going to, we're just going to block this whole thing, okay? Any attempt to hold this administration accountable for these attacks against Venezuela. Oh, great. Lovely. Now, here's the details, okay? So Senator Rand Paul, okay? Rand Paul and Tim Kaine got together and introduced Senate Joint Resolution 90. It's a pretty simple premise, right? That says before Trump can launch military operations in or against Venezuela, he's got to come to Congress and get authorization, like the Constitution requires. Simple, right? However, that resolution failed. 51-49 rejected it. 51 rejected it, okay? That was the vote. The Senate voted to block the resolution that would have required Trump to ask permission before starting a war. What? Again, you had only 2 Republicans that voted with all of the Democrats here, Rand Paul and Lisa Murkowski. Every other Republican senator, including these supposed moderates, decided, you know what, we're going to hand Trump a blank check for military adventurism. Great. Now, The Intercept is reporting what mainstream media is not exactly talking about. They're kind of burying a little bit. The Trump administration has already conducted strikes on these suspected drug smuggling vessels near Venezuela, right? So this isn't about preventing any future actions. It's about basically rubber stamping what's already been happening. And now let me tell you why you should care, right? If you're sitting at home in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, whatever, well, you should care because you work for a living, for one, unlike Congress, okay? Wars, they're not fought by billionaires. They're not fought by the senators who vote to give Trump unlimited power, okay? They're fought by you, your kids, your neighbors, people who bag your groceries. That's who would end up going to war in Venezuela, okay? These senators and their billionaire donors, they don't give a damn about us or democracy or about any of those people, okay? So they just don't. Now, here's the kicker, right? This is actually the second time in a month that the Senate tried and failed to rein in Trump's military powers. They're not even pretending to care about any sort of oversight anymore, okay? So now, you know, by the way, what unlimited war powers cost? Let me break it down. Just in monetary numbers, right? The Iraq War, $3 trillion and count, okay? Because of, care for the troops, their health care, okay? Afghanistan, $2.3 trillion over 20 years, at least. Venezuela, by the way. Venezuela is already costing millions of dollars in covert ops. And that's without an invasion, which could be possible. Now, that's money, by the way. All of that is money that could have been used to fix our infrastructure, funding schools, paying for universal health care, for example, all that stuff. But instead, we're using it for military adventurism. Great. Lining the pockets of defense contractors. While you might end up with a situation where working class kids come home in body bags. Not good. And let me be clear, by the way, too. The people who are going to suffer the most from a war in Venezuela is going to be Latino communities. It's going to be immigrant families. The same people that Trump has spent years so far demonizing, okay? So this isn't just about war powers, right? It's about who gets targeted when authoritarians get unchecked military authority, like Congress is giving Trump. Not only that, but here's what I think should keep you up at night. All right. The fact that the 1973 War Powers Resolution, it was passed for a reason. After Vietnam, after watching presidents drag us into endless, ridiculous wars without any congressional approval, Congress had said, no thanks. We're done with this. And so they passed that resolution. Now, that law is very, very clear. Presidents only get about 60 days of military engagement, then they have to go to Congress. Trump's blown way past that. Okay. And yesterday, the Senate said, don't care. Don't care. You can do whatever you want. You know what this looks like? Yeah, well, it looks like an authoritarian takeover. Okay. And every takeover in history starts the same way. You consolidate military power in a single person. You remove the checks and balances. You create an external enemy to justify that. And you silence dissent as unpatriotic. Remember during the Iraq War, by the way, where people who criticized it were considered to be unpatriotic? Well, it's going to get much worse. We're on step 2, okay? Removing those checks and balances. The Senate, the body that's supposed to be a check on executive power, keeps rolling over. Is rolled over once again. And it's exactly what the Founding Fathers, of course, had feared. It's why we have separation of power, that no one person can have the authority to unilaterally start a disastrous war. And you know what the most infuriating part about all this is, right? You got Rand Paul. Rand Paul, somebody that I disagree with on just about everything, okay, libertarian. He was only one of 2 Republicans that were like, yeah, I'm going to vote against this. This is wrong. We should actually have the president, be subject to checks and balances. Where are the rest of them? Where are the rest of the Republicans? Where are these constitutional conservatives? So-called. Well, they were too busy kissing Donald Trump's ass instead of defending the Constitution they swore to protect. And here's the other funny thing. I mean, it would be funny if it weren't so freaking tragic. Trump voters, especially working class Trump voters, they said that they voted for this guy because he was going to end the wars. And Trump's out there saying, oh, yeah, no, I ended 8 wars. Where? Remember that? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Okay. Remember the America First? Remember no more foreign interventions? Well, we seem to be intervening a lot right now in Venezuela. Okay. A lot of them. Okay. You now, congratulations, Trump voters. You just got a president that the Senate handed unlimited war powers. They won't stop him if he decides he wants to invade Venezuela. I'm sure that's exactly what you signed up for when you said, oh, let's drain the swamp. Right. President that can start wars without asking anybody? And a Senate that rubber stamps military action and then defense contractor profits through the roof while we end up paying for it? Yeah. Trump voters, look, you guys fucked around with authoritarianism, okay? And now we're all going to find out what happens when you give one unhinged man unchecked military power. And I actually do feel bad for the Trump voters who thought he'd be different. You got conned. I don't know how you got conned, but you did. The consequences of this are absolutely real and could be coming for all of us, not just the people who voted for him. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not. So what do we do? I mean, for one, we can't normalize it. Every time Trump wants to use these war powers, every time he wants to bomb Venezuelan boats or whatever, we got to call it out. Every single time. We can't let this just become normal. Okay? Oh, it's just the way things are. No. Secondly, of course, we got to hold the senators accountable. The 51 who voted to give Trump unlimited power, their names are public. And you know what? You should primary them. Run against them. Okay? Vote them out. Make them pay a political price. They want to betray the Constitution. And third, we got to support organizations that are fighting against this. I mean, the War Powers Resolution exists for a reason. legal challenges, they are coming. So you know what? We should support those. And fourth, we tell everybody, we tell the truth. Okay, our neighbors, our families, our communities. A lot of people don't know that this vote actually happened. Mainstream media doesn't really like talking about it. So we have to be the ones that do something about it, that sound the alarm. Look, democracy, it doesn't die in one singular dramatic moment, okay? It dies in 1,000 small, surrenders. And yesterday was one of those. Now the question is, of course, are we going to accept that, or are we going to get together and fight back? Okay. All right. So let's go to the snap stuff. The Trump administration just got absolutely spanked in federal court. And I mean, hey.
Sexual anarchy.
Federal Judge John McConnell Jr. just ordered the Trump administration to fully fund SNAP benefits. That is the food stamp program, of course, for 42 million Americans. Not to partially fund them, but not negotiate about funding them, but to fully fund them. And what did the Trump Department of Justice do? They immediately appealed and asked for an emergency stay because apparently feeding 42 million hungry Americans is too much to ask. But I want to talk about what happens when the courts actually do their job and put a check on executive power, because that's what this looks like. All right. So let me give you the details of how this all went down. All right. So SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, again, food stamps, serves about 42 million Americans, as I mentioned. We're talking about working families, elderly folks, disabled people, kids, people who need help putting food on their table because they're not getting paid enough. The program was running low on funding, which happens. I mean, especially during economic uncertainty and, more people needing assistance. You're going to run out of money, right? Now, that said, there was an emergency fund. There is an emergency fund that was made specifically for situations like this. But here's what the Trump administration did. They decided, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to fund only about 65% of all SNAP benefits. And say, we don't actually have the authority to use all the funds. Wait, you're taking authority in every other place except for this? Weird. So, in essence, they told 42 million people, sorry, we're not going to pay out full benefits. We'll give you a little bit. Oh, okay. But the judge said, no, you're going to use that full emergency contingency fund. You're going to fund SNAP at 100%, not 65, and you're going to do it now, not later. So now Judge McConnell looked at the Trump administration's argument that they could only do that partial funding and said, no, that's BS. You're going to fund it fully because that is what the contingency fund is for. It is for emergencies, and right now there is an emergency. Let me just note that it's totally on brand for this administration to try to shortchange food assistance and then act surprised when a judge tells them, you got to follow the law. Now, you think the Trump administration, I mean, if it were a normal administration, they'd be like, okay, fair enough. That would be too reasonable, though. Which is why that's not what happened. Again, they immediately went to the courts, they appealed same day and asked for emergency stay, right? And so they're asking a higher court to stop them from having to fully fund food stamps while they fight about whether or not they should have to fully fund food stamps. So think about that. They are so committed to not feeding millions of Americans that they're filing emergency appeals to avoid having to do it. Now, and they're using this argument that the judge overstepped his authority, right? And violated the separation of powers by ordering the executive branch to spend these emergency funds. That doesn't make sense. No, yes, the separation of powers. Really, that's their concern. Not the 42 million people who need food. Not the families trying to figure out how to feed their kids on 65% of what they're supposed to get, which they don't get a lot. Okay, not the elderly folks on fixed incomes trying to stretch your grocery budget. No, what really apparently matters is making sure the judges can't tell this administration, can't tell Trump to use those emergency funds during an emergency. Priorities, folks. This administration sure has them. And here's the thing. This is happening while they're holding ACA subsidies hostage in this government shutdown fight, while they're trying to give themselves unlimited war powers for Venezuela, while they're cutting every single social program they can get their grubby little hands on. Okay? But sure, yeah, let's pretend this is all about separation of powers, right? And not about their commitment of making life harder and more miserable for working people. 42 million Americans. That's how many people rely on the SNAP program. Not an abstract number, okay? This is a single mom, working 2 jobs, 2 part-time jobs that don't offer any benefits, right? How about the 70-year-old veteran on a fixed income that's trying to make his Social Security stretch, right? The disabled worker can't work full-time. Still got to eat, though. The family where both parents are working, but because minimum wage is so low and the cost of living so high, doesn't cover rent and food. Those are the people that rely on this program. Not undocumented immigrants. That's a lie, okay? There are no illegals taking SNAP benefits. And it's not even that much money per person. $200. That's how much you get per person per month. Let me tell you what. Personally, my wife and I spend more than that a month on food right now. And it's because of how expensive everything has gotten since COVID. And so there you are. Now imagine only getting 65% of that. About $130 per person per month. For a family of 4, $280 a month in food they cannot afford to buy now. And you wonder why food pantries and food banks are being overwhelmed. This is not tighten your belt money, all right? I mean, a lot of people who are poor and rely on these programs don't even have belts. Be honest. This is now, gee, which of the bills can I get away with not paying so that I can eat? And the Trump administration looked at that situation and said, yeah, you know what, we're good with that. 35% less food assistance looks fine to me. Thankfully, there was a federal judge that said, actually, that is not fine. Fund the goddamn program. Just fund it already. Now, here's what's interesting. Again, after the judge's ruling, you had states that decided, like, for example, California, that were like, we're going to issue the full benefits. They looked at the court order and said, yes, we are going to fund this properly. But the Trump DOJ is still fighting it. And they're telling states, do not comply with this order while they appeal. So you have this insane situation where you have states, some states that have stepped up to feed people properly. And then you have other states that are waiting to see what happens with the Trump appeal. And the Trump administration is out there actively trying to stop other states from feeding people the amount that the judge had ordered, which is the full benefits. This is what your small government looks like in practice. The government fighting in court for the right to give you less in food assistance during an emergency. And speaking of separation of powers, right? Getting back to that argument, I want to talk about that. It's important to note why that is complete and utter crap. Okay? The judge can't order the executive branch to spend money. That violates the separation of powers, they say. Only Congress can appropriate funds, and the executive decides how to spend it. Funny, you know, that's the argument that they're making when they're also proponents of impoundment. Okay? Obviously, there's a big problem with their argument, okay, other than the hypocrisy angle. And that problem is the fact that Congress had already appropriated the emergency contingency fund. That exists, the money's there. It's specifically created for emergencies. That's why it's an emergency fund. The judge is not telling them to spend money that is not there, that doesn't exist, that wasn't appropriated. He said, use the money that's already there. the emergency fund for an emergency. That's it. So the Trump administration's argument is, yes, Congress gave us emergency money for food assistance emergencies, and yes, we're in a food assistance emergency. But, we should get to decide whether we actually use that money for an emergency, the emergency money. That's not separation of powers, okay? That's the executive branch ignoring the law and crying about judicial overreach when they get caught. I mean, you can't just not use funds that Congress appropriates for a specific purpose and then claim that the separation of powers when a judge tells you to do that thing, to do your job. And we have seen this before, okay? Every time a court tells this administration that they can't do something illegal, they call it judicial activism. Every time a judge orders them to follow the law, it's overreach. But when they ignore the law, when they refuse to spend appropriated funds, when they try to cut programs without congressional approval, they just claim, it's executive authority. Which, by the way, Project 2025 called to massively expand. Okay, so to them, it is rules for thee, but not for me. Okay? But here's what's really happening and why this court case matters just beyond SNAP benefits, which is really important. But this administration is basically trying to test how much they can get away with. They are pushing the boundaries, right? On, for example, refusing to spend appropriated funds, SNAP. Holding healthcare hostage in their shutdown fights, the ACA subsidies. Claiming unlimited war powers in Venezuela. Ignoring court orders. This case, if they succeed on their appeal. Each of these is a test. If they can refuse to fully fund SNAP and get away with it, what else can they refuse to fund? Anything? Anything they don't like. Again, they're already trying. If they can ignore a federal judge's order on SNAP, what other court orders can they ignore? And so far, they've already ignored about 35% of all court orders against them. But this is why Judge McConnell's ruling matters. The law in this case, the law here clearly says that you've got to feed the people, right? You've got to use that emergency fund. It's an emergency. You can't just decide that 42 million Americans get 35% less food assistance because you feel like it. This is what checks and balances look like when they actually work. A judge is doing his job and telling the executive branch that they have to do their job. And the Trump administration's response, fight it, appeal it, try to stop it. Because feeding people is apparently less important than winning a legal argument about the separation of powers. So where do we go from here? Or where does this go from here? Well, the Trump DOJ has already appealed to a higher court. And that court will decide whether or not to let that order go, where SNAP gets fully funded, grant the stay, so it's back to 65% of all funding while they fight, or fast track an appeal, where you get a decision that comes quickly. Look, here's what you need to know. All right, if you're on SNAP, you should check with your state to see if they're following the judge's order or if they're waiting for that appeal. Again, as I mentioned, some of the states are already issuing their full amount, like California. But if you're not on SNAP, and if you know people that are, though, make sure that they are aware of this. Because the Trump administration isn't going to advertise that a judge ordered them to fully pay their benefits. But overall, this is a rare win. A judge is checking executive power and enforcing the law and making sure that 42 million people get the food assistance that they're entitled to. But it's also a reminder of who and what we're dealing with. An administration that is so ideologically opposed to helping working people that they would fight in court for the right to give you less food during a food emergency. And again, they're appealing, they're fighting it, they're claiming a judicial overreach and the separation of powers. They're throwing all sorts of legal arguments at the wall to see what sticks. And so far, nothing has. Because right now, today, a federal judge told them, feed the damn people. And I think that in itself is worthy of acknowledging. Okay. Hey, if you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. With that said, let's go to the last story here, and that is jobs. Not everyone. Not everyone. we got some pretty disastrous economic news. 1.1 million Americans have lost their jobs in 2025. Think about that number for a second. 1.1 million people got pink slips this year. And you know what Trump said when he was running for president? That he would be the greatest jobs president God ever created. Well, congratulations. You got that guy. Okay. You got the business. You voted for the business guy. You got the business guy. And what do businesses do? Well, they fire people. Okay. Over 1 million people. While they're making record profits and paying their CEOs millions of dollars. Again, this is what happens when you vote for a failed businessman and expect him to give a damn about working people. Obviously, he doesn't. I know. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about who's cutting jobs and who is getting rich off it. Okay, so let's start with Amazon. They fired 14,000 workers. Their profits, however, for the first half of 2025 are about $35 billion in profit. CEO Andy Jassy got paid $40.1 million. And the company itself spent $120 billion on AI to replace their workers. Oops. So Amazon makes $35 billion in profit in just 6 months, pays their CEO $40 million, spends $120 billion on AI, and still they decide we need to get rid of 14,000 people. Oh. Wow. Okay then. But they're not all. That's not all. UPS. You know how many people they fired? 48,000 total. But their CEOs, their CEO got paid. Okay. And across the industry, they got paid about 14% more this year than they did before. Here's the thing. Nothing says we're all in this together, like firing 48,000 people while giving executives even bigger bonuses, right? Now, there's more. Government's also been cutting jobs. Over 200,000 jobs have been confirmed to have been cut. And that number, of course, is expected to be significantly higher. See, we're kind of in the middle of a government shutdown right now, and so we're not exactly getting jobs numbers from them right now. Okay, but so that number, 200,000, that's a very, very small conservative estimate. Okay, that said, there's more. Manufacturing. You know how many manufacturing jobs were lost since Trump took over? 42,000. This is after promising that the tariffs would bring back manufacturing. Is manufacturing back? No, obviously not. What about wages? They're flat. When you add it all up, 1.1 million people got fired this year, 2025, while corporations made record profits, while CEOs got a lot richer, while executives got bigger and bigger bonuses. And Trump, the guy who said he'd be the greatest jobs president ever, is pretty quiet about this one. He says everything's great, actually. And so, and I remember back during his campaign, what he was saying, oh, I'm going to be the greatest job president that God ever created. And we're going to bring manufacturing back. You know, hey, you buy American, hire American. Oops, they're being fired. Corporate tax cuts, by the way, they're going to create millions of jobs. How did all that work out? Not well. Not well. Look, the Republican Party enacted a whole bunch of corporate tax cuts. Trump said, of the tax cuts, don't worry, they're going to use the money. They're going to hire the workers, right? Instead, what did they do? They use that money for stock buybacks and to increase CEO pay. Trump also promised tariffs would bring jobs back, but we lost 42,000 manufacturing jobs with no increases in wages. 1.1 million people have been laid off. That is recession-level unemployment. Things haven't looked this bad since the pandemic, since COVID started. But it's only looking bad for certain people. It's looking great for others. Like, for example, corporate profits are at record highs. That's right. So Republicans, they cut corporate taxes by 14 points. They deregulated the hell out of their industries. And what happened? Well, corporations, they fired a million people. They automated the jobs with AI. They paid their CEOs more than ever. And Trump, of course, just let it happen. You know, greatest jobs president ever. Look, I think it's pretty clear. Trump's not a jobs president. He's a business president. And businessmen, what do they choose? Profit over people every single goddamn time. Remember, they said, it's going to trickle down, everybody. It's going to trickle down. Remember when Trump said manufacturing would come back? Remember when he said he'd fight for the working class? Well, he didn't. He didn't. So now I want to talk about Amazon specifically, right? Because I think they're the perfect example of everything that is wrong in corporate America right now. As I already mentioned, first 6 months of the year in 2025, they made $35 billion in profit. They fired 14,000 people. They paid their CEO $40.1 million, and they spend $120 billion on automating jobs. Yeah. And still fired, again, 14,000 people, even after that $35 billion in profit. And again, they fired these people not because they were losing money, not because they were struggling. We get that. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because Wall Street loves it when you cut labor costs. Investors love it when you replace workers with cheap AI. $120 billion. You know what AI does, right? It replaces workers. Kind of the whole point. That's why they're pushing so hard on it. Okay? They spent $120 billion to eliminate their jobs. 14,000 of them. If you're one of those workers, think about it, right? Your entire yearly salary, let's say about $80,000, right? If you're lucky. That's 0.0002% of what Amazon made in profit in just 6 months. They could have kept you on. You could have kept your job. They could have kept all 14,000 of them. It wouldn't have even made a dent in their profit margins, but they didn't because your job was worth less to them than a slightly better quarterly earnings report. And it's not just Amazon. The reality is that a lot of these corporations, these big companies, multinational, by the way, they're not American corporations. They got everything that they wanted from Trump. They got their tax cuts, they got deregulation, no oversight, all that stuff. And even the tariffs, right, for manufacturing, because I remember there were a lot of unions that were like, yeah, well, yeah, we support the tariffs. How'd that work out? Not so much. They used all those advantages to fire people and get richer. Now, the other thing is, I want to talk about the Trump voters who are part of that 1.1 million. A lot of them are, right? They're manufacturing workers who believed that the tariffs would save their jobs, which they didn't. Federal employees who thought that they would drain the swamp, but that the swamp meant other people, not them. Okay. How about the logistic workers who trusted the businessman as president? Or the tech workers who thought, oh, deregulation, it'd be great. More AI, they're not going to replace us. Oh, no. Now, look, honestly, I genuinely feel for these people. I do. Nobody wants to be replaced at their job. Nobody wants to lose their job. That sucks. A horrible thing. But here's the thing. You believed it when Trump said he would fight for you. You believed him when he said that corporate tax cuts would, spur businesses to create jobs. You believed him when he said he'd be the jobs guy and bring manufacturing back. Y'all voted for change. But you got it. You got change, but it's not good. It's bad. Here's what you got. A president who gave corporations giant tax cuts and then watched these companies fire 1.1 million people. You got tariffs that didn't bring any manufacturing back. 42,000 jobs. Gone. Drain the swamp. 200,000 federal workers at least, if not many more. Gone. Okay? People in red states were federal workers, voted for Trump, and they got, well, they're the ones that got drained. Again, recession-level layoffs while corporations are making record profit. I know some of these Trump voters wanted somebody to fight for them, the working class, right? And I get it. The establishment did fail you. The Democrats did fail you. Okay? The system ain't working. The system is the problem because it is rigged for the very rich. Voting for Trump wasn't going to fix any of that. No. In reality, he's not fighting for you. He's fighting for the corporations, fighting for his donors. Those corporations, when they have to choose between profits, record profits, and your job, obviously they're going to choose record profits every single time. This is what happens when you vote for a Republican businessman. Okay? Businessmen run things like businesses. And in business, workers are expendable. Labor is just a cost to minimize. And jobs get eliminated to increase profit margins. This is what you voted for. How's it working out for you? Probably not great. But here's the big picture, okay? It ain't just about Trump. This is about a rigged system that is rigged against working class people. Since 2017, the tax cuts, and you can go back further. You can go all the way back to Reagan, okay? You can go back to the Great Divergence, where you have productivity that soars, but wages stay flat, okay? You can go all the way back then, okay? So it happened long before Trump. He is just a continuation of this this robbery, this upward transfer of wealth from the middle and working class to the very wealthy. He's just a continuation, okay? But just since 2017, since those corporate tax cuts were enacted, you have profits that are up 47%. CEO pay up 31%. Workers' wages flat. Technically, they're up 2.3%. But guess what? Drowned by inflation. Okay. The jobs that were created at negative 1.1 million laid off in 2025. And I know they told us that if we just cut corporate taxes, if we just deregulate one more time, just let the businesses do whatever they want, they'll create jobs. It'll trickle down, everybody. Well, that was a trick. I mean, you can't spell trickle down without trick, right? The money never trickles down. It always goes up to the executives, to the shareholders, to the CEOs and their compensation packages. This is an example of class warfare, which the wealthy and corporations have been winning because we continue to elect people who let these corporations do whatever the hell they want without paying their fair share. Okay, you want to know why 1.1 million people lost their jobs while corporations made these record profits? Because the system is designed that way. Because we prioritize, as a society, shareholder value over human beings. Because we let CEOs make 400 times what their workers make. And because we cut corporate taxes and hope, oh, these companies, they'll do the right thing. They'll hire people. They won't, because they never do. And because doing the right thing costs money. And money to them is all that matters. And there you go. That is the show today. Thankfully, AI can humanize with autistic folks. I'm safe. There you go. There you go. Man. Yeah, I'm sorry. Today was, again, a very heavy policy show. But yes, it's also filled with a great keeping helping of FAFO. But hopefully y'all, get something out of it. A little bit of Schadenfreude, a little bit of enjoyment here. And hopefully this is something that you can share with others. So, because I think it is important. All the stuff that I'm talking about today, very important stuff, very significant stuff that is affecting a great deal of people. Okay. Yeah. Okay. They threw out Hyundai. Yep. Oh yeah. West Virginia. will never cover their people's food stamps like California did. Yep. That sucks and that's sad. So there you go. Oh, that's right. Can't walk into a store without ID. That, I mean, is such a hilarious video of Donald Trump talking about how you need ID to go and buy groceries. What are you buying? I mean, because normally you only need ID if you're buying cigarettes and beer, and you can't get that on food stamps. I don't know if you know that. If you've ever been on it, you would know that, no, you can't buy that stuff. You can't even buy a hot sandwich, much less a pack of beer. I mean, come on. What are these people thinking? They're not engaging their brain. I mean, telling one of these, MAGA chuds that just sit and watch Fox News every day all day to engage their brains is like, it's like speaking a foreign language to them. Of which, if you try to speak a foreign language to them, they'll just get mad at you and be like, "Are you here in America? You speak American." Okay, and there you go. All right, so that's all I've got for you today. Thank you again for watching the show. Really, really appreciate it. Again, like and share the stream. Consider becoming a supporter. Patreon.com/jeffwaldorf. All that stuff. When you shop at the country club, you need to show ID. Oh, you see, I've never shopped at the country club. You see, I don't even know if I've been to a country club before. I've been golfing before with my dad back when he was still walking this earth, and I miss him greatly. But I really haven't been shopping at the country club. I guess I don't know. Groceries are foreign to them. It sure is. Sure is. All right, so let's see. If you become wealthy, you earned your wealth, and that wealth was done by somebody who knows what work is. No, you were. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh my gosh. Oh wow. Oh wow. You look at a lot of the wealthy people that are running companies, there is so much goddamn nepotism and so much, I don't know, incompetence, right? A lot of these people get into the positions only because of who they know. Like they have a family member that runs, the company or is in a high up position, and they get other family members involved. Again, that there's that nepotism. I've worked normal jobs. Okay, I've worked in the factories. There's always people in that factory, in that office specifically, that are fucking morons that have no idea what they're doing. And somehow they're in these very high up positions. Again, anybody who's worked in those jobs knows that kind of person. Okay, that's who these executives generally are. Okay, so there you go. All right. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you for watching the show. Have a great weekend, and hopefully see you back here on Monday. Love you all, and remember, change begins with you. Good night.